Good evening. The opinions and statements voiced by our guests do not necessarily reflect the opinions of this network. Enjoy the shows.
You're listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk only on Paranormal Experience Radio. Broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
And welcome to the Full Spectrum Project. I am your host, Brian Clune. Unfortunately, my co-host, Pete Haviland, could not make it tonight. He had some medical issues just before the show, so we want to just, give a shout out to him and hope that he's going to be just fine. He apparently ate something that didn't agree with him. But we are also joined by Angie Mole, who does our Weird World News. And Angie is going to, hopefully, fill in for Pete tonight. She seems to think that we'd be better off without her asking questions. But everybody that knows Angie knows that when she jumps in, we have a lot of fun. So jump in, Angie, and say hello.
Good evening, y'all.
Okay, so that's what we can expect from Angie. Sorry. Anyway, we are joined tonight by Dr. Rita Louise, and we are going to be talking about things that should be really good for the Valentine's Day holiday coming up. And I use the term holiday loosely. I've never been really big on Valentine's Day, as my wife can attest, but this year I am going to try and make it a little bit more special for her. So hopefully I can do that. But please say hello, Dr. Louise, Dr. Rita. Sorry.
That's okay. Hey guys, Brian, Angela, how's it going?
I'm doing good. So, Dr. Rita, for those listeners who might not know much about you, can you give us a little bit of knowledge into your work and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So, as I like to say, for my day job, I work as a medical intuitive. So I do intuitive readings regarding people's health and wellness, physical, emotional, and spiritual. And do counseling work. I am a big researcher and like digging into the deep underworkings of thought, whether it be ghost research. I've written some books on ancient mysteries, kind of like ancient aliens type topics. I've written books on psychic ability and energy work. And my latest book looks at dysfunctional relationships. And so that's been my new thing, and most people are like, well, we don't really know how to classify you. It's like, yeah, sorry. So I'm kind of a girl with a lot of irons in the fire all the time.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, it obviously keeps you busy, and that's always a good thing, at least in my experience.
Mm-hmm. I like it.
So you've written about health, healing, ghosts, ancient mysteries, like you said, aliens. Why did you decide to write a book about healing dysfunctional relationships?
Because apparently I'm really good at them. Not about writing books about dysfunctional relationships, but being a participant in them. And yeah, imagine that. And it wasn't until a couple of years ago that I actually came to the realization that most of my adult relationships were dysfunctional on some level or another, and made me really start looking at my life and my history and where it came from, and so sent me on this journey to heal myself. And again, being this researcher person and being very spiritually open. And I think your audience will resonate with this. I started doing this research and, learning stuff. And then Spirit said, oh, well, you need to write a book about this. And I'm like, oh, okay. And so as I was digging in for my own information, I started just taking notes and, compiling material, and it turned into this book. And I want to just say up front for people listening, one would think that the book is like a memoir, but it's not. It is really a book to help people understand why they keep getting into toxic relationships one after the other, and what they need to do to heal so that they can break that cycle and actually experience happiness in their relationship space.
So, kind of, touching on that, some people search their whole lives looking for true love. Others seem to be lucky and kind of find it first time out. And then others, like what you were just talking about, seem to attract the bottom of the barrel, the rotten apples. No matter how many times they get into a relationship, it always seems that they pick the wrong person. It always seems to go wrong. And they end up basically miserable. Is it always the wrong person? And why do these people always seem to find themselves in unhealthy relationships?
Well, one of the things that I have come to the conclusion, actually, there's two different dynamics that we can talk about. The first one is if you grew up in an unhealthy family situation, if your family was dysfunctional and now you're going and looking to create a relationship, then probably what you're going to recreate in your adult life is going to somehow mirror or reflect the dynamics that you experienced growing up, unless you've done something to change it. So that's one line of thought, and that's really the line of thought that my book discusses. The other line of thought, which I think is a little less common, although I could see it being out there, is that in many relationships, communication isn't very good, and you end up training your partner in how you want to be treated, or not saying no to tell them this is how I expect to be treated. Right. And so, the relationship develops. And so if it really bothers you that they leave their socks on the floor by the coffee table and it just infuriates you, but you never say something about it, that resentment just builds and builds and builds. And obviously I'm making a very simplistic example here. But if you never communicate to your partner, like, that makes me crazy. And they, probably if you said, could you pick your socks up? They would be like, oh, okay. But if you don't say that, then they're never going to do it. And so the change is never going to happen.
Now, you kind of had me thinking about something with that whole exchange there. So and believe me, I understand where, you have to say something if they're leaving their socks. But what happens if there is something that your partner does that drives you absolutely up a wall, and there is nothing that they can do about it because it's a trait, or it's something with you that just it rubs you the wrong way, and even though your partner can't do anything about it, no matter what you do, it rubs you the wrong way, and no matter how many times you tell your partner, can you please stop, they can't stop. And I'm kind of wondering, how does that affect a relationship? Because, you can constantly tell the person, look, you need to stop, but the person can't stop. So then both of you could end up being annoyed. How do you deal with something like that?
Well, I mean, sometimes you go into a relationship, especially if you come with old family baggage, and things happen that you're reacting to. So I'm going to kind of shift from the sock example and give you like a real life example. So when we do laundry, so my boyfriend, we do our laundry, and I always fold the clothes and put them in the basket, and I have tasked him to bring the clothes up in the basket. And he's like, well, you could do it. I'm like, yeah, but you're a guy, so it's your job. So shut up and just do it. And and he complies, which is good. But then he goes and he puts it on the bed. So growing up, my mom would like take my she would take my shoes into my room and put them on my bed. She'd put them on my pillow. Ooh. So I'll go in the room and that basket is on the bed. And I know he's not doing anything to be malicious with the basket on the bed. It's just easier. But it lights something up in me that is a bit irritating,
Right.
And it seems really petty for me to sit there and go, that really makes me crazy. But it could be something that really bothers me, and so, and I think with a couple, it's one thing if it's not in their power to change something,
Right.
and, and then it's like either you can accept it or not, so there might be something being triggered in you that you need to resolve within yourself because they're really not doing anything wrong. They just put the laundry basket on the bed, so that's a me thing. There might be something going on with them that they can't change. I mean, they just can't because it's just part of their personality. I had a manager years ago say to me, you're entirely too sarcastic. You need to stop.
There's no such...
I'm like, it's genetic, dude.
Yeah, what? There's no such thing as being too sarcastic. Trust me on this one.
I'm with you. I'm with you. But for me, would be an impossibility for me to change it because it's just part of who I am. So something like that, you can't change because it's just you. But then you get into, part of the book talks about narcissists, or a lot of the book talks about narcissists, where they choose to not want to change. So you might ask them and ask them and ask them, and they just choose not to do it. And then you have to make a choice whether or not you want to put up with it, whether you want to accept that behavior or not.
Yeah. And, in a situation like that where a narcissist just refuses to change, it seems to me that goes back to the narcissist not having enough respect for his partner. So it kind of makes me wonder whether that's a healthy relationship, regardless of everything else around them seems to be okay.
But that's the nature of the narcissist, is that the world revolves around them. And so they don't really have to have respect for you and what you need and what you want and what you desire because it's about them, period.
Well, now in a situation like that, being in a relationship with a narcissist, does it have a tendency to devolve, shall we say, into maybe an abusive relationship, or maybe even one that's abusive where the partners don't even know it's abusive because it's so subtle?
Very much so. So, and there's a whole section in my book, The Dysfunctional Dance of the Empath and Narcissist, that talks about the life cycle of the narcissist, because they really have, kind of like bugs, a life cycle. And so a relationship with a narcissist starts out with what's called the love bombing stage. And in that period, they are all about you. You walk on water. They want to talk to you all the time. They give you all this attention. Depending on their personality, they might bring you nice gifts or want to do things with you. But there is this definite amount of energy that is sent to you. And so one of the things about narcissists is that they tend to prey on people that have self-worth issues, have self-esteem issues. And so when someone that has not great self-esteem is being inundated with this level of affection and attention, they think it's the real thing. You don't think that someone's doing something just for their own purposes, or that they don't really mean it, so it gets misconstrued. So this is where this dance starts happening. But once the narcissist starts feeling safe in the relationship, and many times they try to trap you. They get you pregnant, you'll get married. In my situation, in one of my relationships, I bought a house for him and his kids to live in. And in the meantime, he let me go back to school full time, so I wasn't working. So now you're trapped on a lot of levels. And that's when this mask, this facade of, I'm going to be this great guy and do all of these things and participate, ends. And it might start a little bit at a time. It might be all at once. My late husband, so I was number 6. I was his 6th marriage. And when we got married, it was like a month into the marriage, and he looked at me and he said, well, I'm waiting. And I'm like, waiting for what? And he goes, I'm waiting for you to change. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he goes, well, it's happened every time. It's like, I'll get married, and in about a month, they change completely. And they're not the same person that I got involved with. And it's like, well, dude, I told you this, 2 months ago, 6 months ago, however long. It's like, this is it. I'm like, one size fits all, like you'll see me with bad hair, and I might not put makeup on every day, but that's pretty much about as bad as it gets. I don't change, but these people will change. And if they're not getting their way, it's all about them getting their way. They will be mean to you. They will lie to you. They will manipulate you. They'll forget things. They'll procrastinate things, all in order to get what they want, which can include gaslighting. They just use a lot of manipulation techniques to navigate that. And as part of it, it can include abuse. I mean, manipulation is abuse, but it also can go up to and include, physical abuse.
Right.
As part of that.
So when your late husband was talking about waiting for you to change, I can assume that he was the one who kept getting involved with narcissists. He'd be getting in a relationship with them, not he. In other words, he wasn't the narcissist.
No, he was not. He was not. He was definitely a people pleaser kind of guy. And, it was just amazing being in a relationship with him, because I had always been the people pleaser person in the relationship. And, things work really good if like both people work on cleaning and both people energetically and emotionally commit to making the relationship work, where it's more like a 50-50 thing versus, 70-30, or 90-10, as the case may be, where you're doing the 90 and they're doing the 10. And then if you're not doing the 90, they're complaining about it.
Right. Wow. What is it that the narcissist gets out of all of this? Now, I understand that, that it's almost like they're looking for a possession, but with narcissistic behavior, can they be content with just one person?
They can be content with one person, and I'm going to say this anyway, if that one person is willing to kiss their ass all the time and be compliant and never say no and just do what they want. Because if they're not getting what they want, then they start going into these devaluation strategies and manipulation strategies.
Gotcha. All right. Well, we need to take a quick break, but when we come back, we will continue speaking with Dr. Rita Louise about relationships, and later on in the show, we're going to get into some strange relationships. So we'll see you on the other side of the break.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but... Nope. That'll do. Hello. I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experience here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk only on Paranormal Experience Radio. Broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama. Since 1948, Fate Magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting. You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
This is Jason Bland, host of Midwest Paranormal Presents Paranormal Soup, where we stream live as a webcast every Sunday night, 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. Eastern, with guests who will blow your mind. Live ghost box sessions where you can call into the show to see if the spirits will talk to you, and the world wide web of weird with the latest in paranormal news and evidence. We're bringing the weird every Sunday night, 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. Eastern on our Facebook page and YouTube channel. Don't forget to follow and subscribe.
Thank you for listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. The time is 23 minutes after the hour.
And welcome back to the Full Spectrum Project on WBHM-DB out of Birmingham, Alabama. If you haven't joined the chat room already, please go to the chat room at WBHM-DB.com. Click on our show banner, and it will take you to the chat room. And if you would like to call in with any questions for our guests or the host, you can call in to area code 205-533-7982. And we've been talking with Dr. Rita Louise. And Dr. Rita, you had mentioned earlier that we learn a lot of the things we take into adulthood from our childhood. In other words, we kind of get programmed from an early age to seek out those that aren't good for us. Do we learn that from watching our parents, television, things like that? Both. Where do we learn that usually?
I think a lot of it comes from our parents. I mean, I think, because I'm old, we only had like so many channels. And we were only allowed to watch so much TV, so there wasn't a whole bunch of TV influence, not like it is now.
Right.
But we learned about relationships, how we interact with each other, how we're supposed to treat each other, in our primary relationships with our family, but it can be our extended family, growing up in school, kids that we hang around with, other adults that we're interacting with, but that's where we form, our core beliefs and establish our values and get to understand that this is how the world is and this is how I fit into the world. And so if you come from a place of dysfunction, and then, I like to use the line, you don't necessarily learn what right looks like. Right. And so when you get into a relationship, instead of having the boundaries to say, hey, pick your socks up, it makes me crazy, and don't do it again. You learn to accept things, and it really depends on the family, how that all plays out, in that person's psyche. And it's true for both the empath, who, if they're in a dysfunctional place, can become the people pleaser, or if it's in a more dysfunctional place, become the codependent, or on the other end of the scale, they can become the narcissist, or actually there is actually a clinical narcissistic personality disorder, which is part of the cluster B personality disorders, which includes psychopaths, yay,
Right.
and then people with borderline personality or disorder and histrionic personality disorder. Don't ask me about that one because I couldn't really tell you. So, because they all have a certain amount of narcissistic tendencies. And I think with people that are narcissists in particular, they researchers suggest that, there can be a biological piece to it, but I think that, there's really a huge nurture piece or lack of nurture piece that those children experience that program them into this me place. And I'm just going to make a little commentary. It's a little scary, with the, no kid left behind, everybody passes. We don't score things when we play baseball because everybody wins and gets a trophy.
Right.
Then what happens when you're an adult and you lose and you don't get the job? You were just trained, everybody wins.
Yeah, and I could imagine that would take an emotional toll on an adult who was taught as a child that no matter what you do, you're going to come out ahead, whether you fail or not.
Whether you do anything.
Right. So yeah, that could be a little emotionally disturbing. So you had touched on an empath in these relationships. So I'm curious, if an empath falls in love with a controlling, abusive person, besides the normal emotional toll that can take, how much worse can it be for an empath to not only, feel it from the person, but also feel it internally from the person, if you understand what I'm trying to say?
No, I totally understand. So, and let me just kind of, for the listeners, just describe an empath. So an empath is someone who is sensitive to the world around them and can internally feel other people's feelings, and kind of pick up energy. They're psychic sponges, so they pick up energy from the world around them. And many times there's not a consciousness to it. It's just like, God, I just feel weird. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but this whole election cycle and COVID thing, for anybody who is sensitive and open to energy has just been awful.
Right.
It's been awful. And my advice to people is like, the only thing you need to do today is breathe. And if you can do that and keep yourself sane, then you've done enough. And if you can do more than that, that's great. But if all you can do is just breathe and be present, then that's okay. And that should be okay. So, so one of the things that happens with an empath, especially ones that come from a dysfunctional place, is one, they suck at having boundaries. But then there's this other aspect that comes up. It's like, okay, so I want you to pick your socks up. And so I get up the courage to say, well, I want you to pick your socks up. And now you're having an emotional reaction because now I just triggered you because you don't want to pick your socks up. And the empath can feel that upset in the other person. And it can be even more distressing, the upset that they're having, than dealing with their own upset about the socks being on the floor. And so sometimes it's just easier to not say anything than to have to experience the discomfort in someone else's body.
Even though you've been with that person, you still don't want to have to feel that, because it seems to me that in a way has put up other barriers, because the longer you're with a person, the more comfortable you should feel with, and I don't want to say getting in their face, but expressing displeasure on things they do. It seems like it would get easier.
Not if you're with a narcissist.
Because of their explosive comebacks and behavior.
Well, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it's explosive. It could become very passive aggressive. Mm-hmm. It can come out in a lot of different ways that is not overt. I think for many people, if the person was explosive, and did do these things where it was in your face, I think people would recognize it a lot easier.
Yeah, you're probably right.
But many times it is very passive aggressive, and then you're like, you don't know what to do with it. I never knew what to do with it.
Right. So, getting back to the empath,
okay.
Can an empath change over time and become a narcissist or an abuser themselves due to picking up on their partner's abusive behavior and narcissism? Can it affect them and start changing them?
That's a great question. And really what I'm talking about is an empath who, so one of the things that I believe is that people come into the world sensitive, and you can work with that gift and have it be stronger. And so individuals who are born into families that are open to psychic abilities or do ghost hunting or whatever, where there's an openness for them to explore their gifts, can develop them. If a sensitive person is born into a dysfunctional family, they use that sensitivity kind of like cat whiskers to feel out the environment. It's like, oh, mom's in a bad mood. Oh, dad just came home and he's really drunk. Whatever that is, in order to be safe, can I come out and play? And if I can't come out and play, well, then I'm going to go do something else or not come out of my room. And so by default, they kind of hone that skill of tapping into the emotional energy of what's going on in their environment. Right. So it's not that they necessarily asked for it, but it was a survival skill. But tied with that, it's like now they have these dysfunctional patterns because, you learn that it's easier to comply than to resist, your parents. Okay, so now you have this person who's compliant, which becomes a people pleaser or a codependent. So now they're coming into a relationship a bit dysfunctional. And now you have this narcissist who just wants stuff, but the people pleaser has been trained to just take care of what they need. And if you can't do it, then instead of saying something to them, they typically internalize what's going on, because they're already dysfunctional, and bring it upon themselves, and it lights up their self-worth, oh, well, I'm not good enough, I'm not doing this well enough, they're not going to like me, they're going to want to get rid of me, whatever your internal crap is. And,
right.
And so that's kind of how that dynamic moves forward. And for a narcissist to have somebody to do this stuff and not really give them a hard time about it is great. But one of the things that happens is that, it's very challenging for the empath to have boundaries. And so as the relationship progresses, two things can happen. There's a couple of different things can happen. One, they can get rid of the narcissist. That would be the healthiest thing.
Right.
but I can't really see where an empath would ever become a narcissist, because I can't see where they can't look at the other people and have empathy for them, because that's just who they are. Now, there are many empaths who become very concerned that they're becoming narcissists or are narcissists, because now I'm taking care of myself and now I'm having boundaries. And so a lot of times they get concerned, like, oh, well, I'm not supposed to do that. That's really not a good thing. I'm supposed to be taking care of you or taking care of everything. And so they, but that's not really the case, you know.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, because it's kind of interesting. The fact that they're worried about becoming a narcissist sort of proves that they're not becoming a narcissist.
Correct. Right. You know, I was giving a presentation to a Lions Club, and, you know, this book had just come out. And so I did a presentation called The Happiness and the Four Selves. And one of the four selves that I was talking about was self-love. And I was talking about, you know, doing things and taking time for yourself and having the ability to use that time to recharge your battery. You know, so if someone's calling you up and saying, hey, can you help me move? You know, but you already have plans, you're not really feeling it, you know, whatever the reason is, that you can make a conscious choice and say no and not feel guilty, because you're being loving to yourself by saying no. You're honoring yourself. You're listening to yourself. You know, I just put in a 60-hour week and now somebody wants me to help them move. You know?
Right.
It's like, I love you, but I can't. I have to tell you, and you know, the Lions Club is a service type organization, which is why I gave this presentation there. And there were several members who were really offended with me making that commentary.
Really?
As if, you know, telling a friend, you know, and, you know, you kind of have to look at that friend spectrum too, you know, where they are in that friend list. Telling that friend no was like they were being a narcissist in that moment. And it's like, no, you were just loving yourself. You know, and when you are loving yourself, you can also make a conscious choice. Yes, I will choose to help this person, or no, I'm choosing not to help this person, but I'm choosing. I'm not just getting sucked into doing everything that people want.
Right.
You know, I have a girlfriend that I'm not going to name names, and you ask her if she wants to do something. You know, do you want to go out to dinner? Or do you want, and she's always, you know, well, if you need any help, just let me know. But then when it comes time to like go out to dinner or do whatever, she's a no-show. You know, doesn't answer the phone, doesn't respond to text. You know, you get some lame excuse about, well, oh, my phone was turned off or whatever, you know, 3 days later.
Right.
You know, and it's kind of like, you know, if you didn't want to do it, then tell me. Or if you're not going to come, you know, at least an hour before, tell me that you're not going to come, and don't like have me sitting here waiting for you to maybe come, but now I'm texting you going, hey, are we still going? And you're not responding to me. I mean,
yeah, I have a friend that does the same thing, and it drives me up a wall. But then that same person expects me to be there the minute they call. And
see, that's kind of narcissistic. This person doesn't have that expectation, thank God,
right.
Which is why I still interact. But she's too afraid to say no.
Really?
You know, it's kind of like, I can handle no. I can handle, you know, I just got off work and I'm really tired and I'm just going to stay home. I can handle that.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
I mean, but if a relationship is just one-sided, like the only time you hear from them is when they want something, then maybe it's a bit narcissistic.
Yeah, I would say yes to that. Um, you know, sometimes it's really easy to tell when you are in an unhealthy relationship. Other times it can be really subtle, hidden. How can you tell if you're in a toxic relationship if it's being hidden? Are there certain things you can look for?
I think, if they're not willing to be there for you to meet your needs, and I don't mean every single need, but if, the propensity is that, you say, hey, can you pick up my socks for me? And they blow you off constantly. Um, that's a pretty good sign. Um,
Right.
it can just be really tricky with, identifying what's going on. Um, I'm just trying to think of some other examples. One of the things that I have learned about narcissists is there are things that they want to do or are willing to do, and then there are things that they don't want to do or are not willing to do. And depending on where their interest is, will depend on whether they will comply.
Okay.
Example. One of my husbands apparently didn't like mowing the backyard. Actually, he didn't like doing any housework at all. We'll just put it there. He didn't like doing any housework at all, which included mowing the backyard. So I pretty much kept the house clean, which was fine. He saw my face. It's like, it was fine. But I wasn't going to go mow the lawn. That's
Right.
guy work. It's like carrying the damn laundry basket. It's guy work. Sorry, ain't doing it. I clean toilets. You mow the lawn. And
Dr. Rita, can we hold it there just for a second?
Sure.
We'll come back to your story, but we have to take a station identification. I'm having a heck of a time talking tonight. We have to take a quick station identification break, and then we'll continue with your story. So we'll see everybody on the other side of the break.
You're listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but... Nope. That'll do. Hello. I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experience here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experienced Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
And welcome back to the Full Spectrum Project on WBHM-DB out of Birmingham, Alabama. If you haven't joined the chat room already, please go to the chat room at WBHM-DB.com and click on the Full Spectrum Project show banner. That'll take you to the chat room. And if you would like to call in with any questions for our guests or the hosts, please call area code 205-533-7982. And so, Dr. Rita, something that I wanted to mention, and this is kind of weird. It's kind of a personal thing, but did you know that no matter how much ketchup, mustard, or Heinz 57 steak sauce you put on your eyes, it will never give you hindsight?
That was so funny. I forgot to laugh.
I actually think Angie just kind of left on that one for a minute.
I was going to, but then I would never do that to Dr. Rita, so I'm still here.
You've been very quiet.
I know. It's like, where have you been, Angie?
Right here, thinking about all of my past relationships.
Well, then you should just jump in. Angie, I'm going to tell you, I've done a lot of interviews, obviously, on this topic, and the female interviewers that I've worked with, we get into like stories, and they have probably been some of the most impactful interviews because they're real.
Well,
I bet you got stories. I know I do.
Nightmares is what I have. Luckily, I'm not in that situation anymore, but whew, buddy. Yeah.
I take it
I've had multiple. I mean, it's just kind of like, really? How the hell would I do that to myself? But anyway.
I'll just write a book.
Okay.
That book would scare me.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it would.
Well, and I think if I couldn't laugh at some of the stuff at this point in time, that I would just have to cry, because it was just like, oh, God.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right, so I apologize for that little off bit there, but so we were talking about one of your ex-husbands and not wanting to mow the lawn.
Okay, so he didn't really want to do anything, and I'll just kind of add, because I do talk bad about him, and I don't care. I selflessly and shamelessly talk bad about him. Then he wouldn't work, and so he would be home all day. So this is me. I'm in school. I'm working a part-time job. I'm also doing my business because he's not working and I have to support the family. He won't clean the house. He just sits around the house and plays on his computer all day, won't mow the lawn. And I'm like doing all of my stuff, plus taking care of the house. And then
Right.
He would wonder why I was just a little bit cranky, a little bit. But then he would play well, you're home all day. It's like, do you see me eating bonbons?
Right.
Ever? But what was interesting is that I was in a different relationship, and he really liked doing yard work. So I have a big yard. He would mow the lawn and edge it really nice and fertilize it and make sure it got watered. I mean, he enjoyed it. It was a passion for him. So the yard always was done,
Right.
and planting was done. And, now don't ask him to really do anything else. But I always had a good yard because he was interested in it. If I had asked my ex-husband to help me with something on my computer, I'm sure he would have been all over it.
Right.
Because he was remotely interested in it. But it was because he was interested and it didn't have anything to do with what I wanted or what I needed.
Yeah. Well, I know for me, once I retired from my day job, it was more about, okay, I'm going to be here. So this is the atmosphere I want. So, and again, like we were talking about during the break, because I'd worked outdoors for so long, I just liked being outside. So and being here in California, we have a really long spring, summer, and then kind of a short fall. So we get a lot of sunshine, And it was just nice being outside and listening to music and doing some work. And I actually got a tan for the first time in my entire life. So,
Wow.
yeah, it was all good. So, getting back to the topic, people say that you always have to work on a relationship, take the good with the bad. But how long should one try if the other person isn't willing to compromise and work on it as well?
You know, and that was something that I didn't recognize. You know, you grow up and, you know, it's like a marriage is forever, you know, and you're supposed to make a commitment to the relationship and make it work and take the good with the bad. And it's like, oh, well, they had an affair on me, you know, well, we're working on it. And it's like, well, maybe not. You know, and actually I'm working on a bunch of new articles, and one of them is about, well, am I happy or am I content? And then, you know, why are you staying? You know, why do people stay in relationships? That's the name of one of the articles. And so I think the advice that I'd like to give people is, if you have more days where you're unhappy and you're ruminating or you're worried about what's going to happen or their behavior or whatever, then that's when you need to sit down and reevaluate what's going on. You know, especially if you have communicated to this other person, this is what I need from you. And you know, one of the things that narcissists do is that they give you lip service, you know, and they'll say, I mean, the one person that I was with, he had a drinking problem, and I don't know if all of his issues were around the drinking problem. And so I said, you know, if you want to stay, you need to go to AA, period. And my thought was, because he wasn't working, that he would go to AA every day. Well, that wasn't flying. He goes, well, I'm going to go on Thursday. And he went once. And he was like, well, I don't really like those people, and gave me all these excuses about why he couldn't go. But in the meantime, I'm not upset anymore, because what led me to tell him, you need to go to AA, had dwindled inside of me, you know, and I didn't have follow through. And so it just kind of went on and on and on, you know. And so if you're in a situation where you keep asking and you keep getting the same result, then you have to, again, stop and go, well, you know, we've been down this road before and nothing's changing, you know. And how many times am I going to say, you know, if you do that one more time, you know, do you do it once? Is it a 3 strikes you're out kind of rule? Right. You know, and everyone needs to make that decision for themselves of, how many times are you going to say, well, if you do that one more time, or feel if you do that one more time, before you decide you don't want to participate, and on some levels forgive them for doing something that you find really offending.
Right. So you had kind of touched on it with when you were talking about one of the articles you were going to write. Why do people stay in these unhealthy relationships?
So one reason people stay in unhealthy relationships, you know, and I'm going to talk about women. So forgive me, but I'm going to talk about women because it seems to be a little more of a girl thing in some of these than a unisex kind of thing. But it could be on both sides. You know, so one of the things that I see that is very prevalent is that when you're in a long-term relationship, it's like you create a foundation. You establish a house together. Maybe you have children together. You know, there's this history that you don't want to break it up. You know, there are a lot of women that won't leave toxic relationships because they think they're staying for the children. And the reality is that the kids know what's going on, you know, whether it's on verbal levels or not. They can feel the tension in the household. And so even though they think they're making it better for their kids, they're really not, it's really not benefiting them, because as a single individual, you can actually be nicer and kinder to them by yourself. That's what they found. But also in that, especially again with women, is that they, this has never been my situation because I've always been very financially independent, but they become financially dependent on their spouse. And so they can't afford to get an apartment or, with or without their children. They have become accustomed to the lifestyle in which they've been living and don't want to give it up. And so they would rather live a life where they're not happy, and have nice clothes than have a life where they're in a little one-bedroom apartment and they're working at Walmart.
Right.
And they make that choice, and so they're miserable, but they stay.
Well, it seems to me, though, when you're talking about a situation like that, do they ever think that, okay, I may have to live in a one-bedroom apartment and work at Walmart, but then I might be able to meet the right guy?
They don't go that far, because they get stuck in a survival place. And so they don't. And it's just really sad. Again, I've always been very financially independent. And so I've never been in a situation where I had to think about like going and getting a job at Walmart, so I could just survive, or there are women that aren't working because that's one of the controlling things that their partners do is, they're stay-at-home moms, or they just are at home, and that's part of the control thing is that they don't have the ability to go earn money and go have a job because their partner doesn't want them to. And there are people that recommend it's like, well, maybe you should consider going to a shelter, or going to somewhere where you can regroup yourself.
Right.
Getting a little more insidious, there is something that's called trauma bonding. And so trauma bonding is a phenomena that's kind of like Stockholm syndrome. And so when you're in, and this really applies to individuals that are in pretty abusive relationships, but any abuse is going to create this. And so when there is uncertainty going on, when there is discord going on, the body releases a lot of cortisol. It's the fight or flight response, and you're edgy and, on edge and worried and just walking around on eggshells. And so, and so something happens or whatever, you're in that situation, but then it resolves, they come home. And so, I'm going to use the drinking as an example. It's like, so your partner doesn't really come home that night, or it's like 2:00 in the morning and they're still not home, and so can you imagine all of the energy that's going on inside of you? Are they dead? Are they in a bar getting drunk? Are they with somebody else? So just think of,
I'm sorry, Dr. Rita. I'm sorry, but we do have to take a quick station identification break, and then when we come back, we will go into our Weird World News segment with Angie Mole.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting. The best in paranormal talk radio.
All right, I am going to try and do this, but I guarantee I cannot do it as well as my co-host Pete Haviland. But ladies and gentlemen, Here is our Weird World News with Angie Mole. Take it away, Angie.
Good evening, y'all. How's everybody?
Absolutely fantastic.
That is what I wanted to hear.
The days are getting longer and the nights are getting colder. Wait, something like that.
Don't sing. Okay. A man in Bentonville, Arkansas, which is also known as the home of Walmart, has caused more than $2,500 worth of damage to a neighbor's grave and was able to plead down to a misdemeanor charge from what should have been a felony. Joseph Stroud is almost 80 years old and has had a long-standing feud with the deceased after they shared a property line. They never got along, so after the one man died, it only makes sense that Stroud would dress up like a woman and leave dead animals on the man's headstone over a dozen times.
Okay.
I mean, that's typical, right? That's what one does?
No. I mean, I've had some bad neighbors in my time living here, but I wouldn't go quite that far. So.
Well, he was caught on video placing the animals on the headstone while wearing a wig and women's clothing. And the funny thing is the news site that I was looking at this on the first time, because I saw it in several places, they had video footage of him in Walmart, which was already funny being that it's Bentonville. And then they also had video footage of him with a dead raccoon in his hands in the cemetery. And he was wearing the same shoes. And they pointed out the shoe similarity. And I thought that was hilarious.
Did they ever find, why was he wearing women's clothes?
Well,
and a wig and everything.
I don't know. And
I have a theory. Maybe he was trying. Maybe he was trying out to be one of the people of Walmart, because I believe they have their own website now.
Well, I mean, he's winning.
Yeah.
He has been required to forfeit his driver's license due to his diminished mental state, and he must pay restitution to repair the excessive blood staining of the headstone.
Can you imagine? There are a lot of ghost hunters that like to traipse through cemeteries. Could you imagine them going up and not knowing about that and seeing all these blood stains all over one of the tombstones?
I mean, I think it's hilarious, except for the fact that it was the daughter who found out that this was happening and had to report it. And so I feel really bad for the family in that, they had to endure the whole thing. So yeah, I mean, that part sucks. The situation, if it were, I guess, a little different, I think is hilarious, but not if it's going to upset a family member. That sucks.
Yeah. This is kind of a cliche, but my great aunt was escorted off of the cemetery grounds. This was years ago, by the police, because she was actually having a picnic on her deceased husband's grave. And she actually told the police, and this is where the cliche comes in. And I can't remember my great uncle's name, unfortunately, but she actually said, because I always wanted to have a drink on George. As they were escorting her out, they were asking her why she was doing it.
That is so strange, because in other cultures, that is perfectly normal and done all the time.
Yeah, well, not really here. I mean, there are some cemeteries that, like we have one near.
Was this in California?
No, I believe it was back in Ohio, if I remember correctly.
Okay, that makes sense. Midwesterners don't do like the Day of the Dead and everything like we do down here. That's different.
Yeah, but I mean, there's a really nice cemetery here near me, and this is way back when. I used to actually go there with an old girlfriend of mine, and we would have picnics in the cemetery just because it was a nice place to do it. So, may have been weird, but
Well, it's quiet.
uh-huh.
The only people who don't hate gender reveal parties and baby showers are the people who plan the parties. The general consensus now seems to be that they're awful, but people just keep doing them. Not to be outdone by the pipe bomb couple or the fire starters or the couple in I'm sorry, I can't say that. There was a couple in Michigan.
I was going to say, now you have to say it.
I censored myself. It's all good.
Okay.
So a couple in Michigan decided to use a cannon to celebrate the arrival of their child, and as expected, things went wrong. A 26-year-old man standing 15 or so feet away died from injuries sustained from shrapnel.
Oh.
The cannon was more of a novelty type. It didn't contain a projectile. The current theory is that the gunpowder load was too strong for the size and type of cannon, and it caused the barrel to come apart when they lit it.
Ouch.
So then pieces of the cannon went flying, and for
killed
what?
The guy.
Yeah.
So
yeah. He lived until he was at the hospital.
I'm sorry, but I have to ask. So it was a gender reveal party for the coming of the baby that killed a man. Was that like coming and going at the same time? No?
Yeah. Thank you for addressing that, because I didn't want to. The worst part of all of it is that I feel sorry for the kid to be, because stupidity is often genetic. But hey, maybe this baby will break
the One can only hope.
Yep. In 1717, sorry.
I was going to say, when you were talking about the fire starter couple, you were talking about the couple that had the explosive confetti here in California.
Oh, the morons that started the forest fire. Yes.
Yeah, one of the worst fires in California history.
Yeah.
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 All right.
I mean, I will say that this could be arguably less awful, but dude died, so
yeah, not by much. Yeah. Anyway, sorry, didn't mean to cut you off.
It's okay. In 1717, a ship called the Whydah went down off the coast of Massachusetts after being attacked by pirates. 6 skeletons of the pirates have been located in the wreckage. It's been known for a long time that the Whydah was a slave ship, and 1/3 of the crew was of African origin. The DNA extracted from the bones recently are of an Eastern Mediterranean male. After some sleuthing, a man in Devonshire, England, has identified himself as a blood relative of the ship's captain, Samuel Black Sam Bellamy, and DNA testing is going on right now to determine whether or not some of the bones belong to Bellamy. The shipwreck and some skeletons were discovered in 1984, and there is a Whydah Pirate Museum in Cape Cod with lots of interesting displays, including one of the concretions containing bones of one of the pirates.
Right.
So the reason why I thought that was so interesting, the reason I thought it was so cool, is because they are doing the DNA testing on people who claim to be relatives of and being from Texas, like the East Coast legends and all that, like I don't know anything about that. So, but apparently this Black Sam guy is pretty well known, and so I don't know.
He's at Bellamy is actually really well known in pirate lore. So
yeah, and see, I don't know anything about pirates either, except I love Captain Morgan. But so I guess
comment.
I guess the thing here is that it's a really big deal because they have a living person to they could do the genealogy on and say, yes, he's a direct descendant of this guy we know to be a pirate. And now we can, identify conclusively that this is his skeleton from, the early 1700s. That's pretty cool. I think it's really cool.
No, definitely. It definitely is. Is there any idea on the, you know what, never mind. My brain just kind of took a vacation.
Well, the answer is no. I don't know what you were going to ask, but the answer is no. I gave you all the information I had.
Okay.
If you're into music, you may be familiar with the Stratocaster, but have you heard of the Skelecaster?
Oh, yeah. I have heard of this, but please go on.
Unfortunately, there is a person who I have got to try to say that. I mean, it doesn't matter if my face stays straight, but I need to sound like I'm not laughing. Unfortunately, there is a person who likes to call himself Prince Midnight, and he has turned his Uncle Philip's skeleton, minus the limbs and the head, into a guitar. Yeah. 20 years ago, the uncle died in a car accident and had previously requested that his body be donated to science upon his death. And that was done. Years later, when the university was done with Uncle Philip, he was returned to the family. Since Philip's religion didn't allow for cremation and burial in Philip's home country of Greece was going to be too expensive, Prince Midnight did all the paperwork necessary to get Philip to the U.S. Midnight's philosophy is this, and I quote, "I wanted to memorialize the guy who got me into heavy metal. Anyways, now Uncle Philip can shred for an eternity. That's how he'd want it. I'm super proud of the project and how it serves to honor him, his life, and his influence of me."
Now, we know,
Uncle Philip.
I was going to say, we know all he wanted to do was play with Uncle Philip.
His weird Uncle Philip?
I don't know.
I mean, okay, so I saw the images and all of that, and I mean, it does look pretty cool, I'm not going to lie, but I probably would have left off the pelvis.
Yeah, I've seen pictures of it, and it's like, oh my God, no. Just no.
And there are also the guy can't tour with him, like if he's in a band, I'm pretty sure he's not going to be allowed to bring that guitar back and forth.
I mean, you never know. You have people like Ozzy Osbourne who bit the head off of a live bat. I mean, it's amazing what they'll let go in concerts. So you never know.
My understanding is that he didn't actually bite the head all the way off. He just bit it.
But you understand what I'm saying.
And customs is the one you have to deal with. It has nothing to do with like the concert venue. Well, I mean, they made us. Well, I won't get into that. But let's just say we went to Mexico with an alligator head, an alligator skull on the car, and we had to remove it before we could re-enter the United States, even though it was an American alligator and nothing but a skull. So, whatever. Good luck trying that with Uncle Philip, dude.
Well, yeah. Okay, so there may be one or two countries where, Uncle Philip would need a special passport or something, but,
Oh, a special passport. Oh, well, y'all, that's all I've got for y'all tonight. I know this wasn't as long as normal, but I think I gave you a lot to think about.
Yeah, that's kind of an understatement, especially Uncle Philip.
Yes. So that is all I've got. Thank you so much for listening to the Full Spectrum Project's Weird World News on WBHM-DB, Birmingham, Alabama. So let's get back to you, Brian and Dr. Rita.
All right. Thank you, Angie. Angie, just hang around for just a sec.
Okay.
So I'm working on a few different books, right?
Yes.
All right. So I've been thinking about, especially with way things are in the paranormal community nowadays, I've been thinking about writing a book about paranoia and the paranormal. kind of as a, a combination type of thing.
Oh,
All right.
uh-huh.
So I went to the library, all right, and I was asking the librarian if they had any books on the subject of paranoia. Her response was really weird, all right? So she stands up, she walks around the counter, comes up to me, and she's looking around while she's doing it, and she whispers in my ear, "Right behind you," and then looked that way really quick. I mean, it really scared the heck out of me, but she was pointing at one of the corridors. So I'm not really sure what that was all about, but I just thought that that was a bizarre way for the librarian to approach the situation. What do you think?
I think it's perfectly normal because librarians typically whisper.
I hadn't even thought about that.
But then,
Yeah,
did you turn around and then look back and she was gone?
And the lights were flickering.
Okay, now you guys are just scaring me. Okay?
What? Because we made your joke funnier than you could?
I am never going back to the library ever again. Thank you.
Who goes to the library anyway?
Me?
Oh, I do.
I love the library.
Yeah, seriously, I go to the library all the time. Every time I have to do research on a book, one of the first places I go to is a library.
I guess I just never find the books that I'm looking for at a library.
Well, now
that is true. I live in I could go to the university library here and they have like everything, but the regular county library really doesn't have a whole lot here.
Yeah. Oh, well,
but I still like to go.
It's funny you mentioned that, Angie, because when I was doing research for the Queen Mary book, believe it or not, the two places that helped me out the most were the University of Liverpool Student Library and the Long Beach University Student Library. Those are the places I found the most wealth of information on the Queen Mary. So, it's amazing what university libraries carry. I mean, it's really a great source. All right. So anyway, thank you, Angie. And it was fun as usual.
Thank you.
Okay. So welcome back, everybody. We have been talking to Dr. Rita Louise. And, I'm sorry, Dr. Rita, I do not remember where we left off. Do you?
Kind of not really, but let's just pick something new.
Okay. Well, we can go real new.
Okay.
So let's change focus just a little bit. So do you happen to have, and it was something I was thinking about when Pete told me that you were coming on the show. What would it be like to be in love with a psychic? I mean, an actual, true psychic who has the intuitive ability to basically be able to know what you're thinking. Could you even imagine that?
Well, that's actually, no one's ever asked me that question before. I am going to say this. Psychics can't read your mind.
I understand that.
If you're thinking like, what color am I thinking? But I'm just saying this for the audience. It's like psychics don't do that.
Right.
They read the energy in your space and whatever. So my experience or the feedback that I received, although it really didn't help me at all, is you always know when your partner's lying.
Okay.
And if you're with a narcissist, they lie about them not lying, even though they're lying, and it makes you crazy because they're lying.
Okay.
So my ex-husband, the one who didn't mow the grass, we had, I'd like to say we had this really deep psychic connection, although, anyway, so it would be like 10 o'clock in the morning and I would be thinking, I think having barbecue for dinner would be good, or maybe 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I would think, having barbecue for dinner would be good. So then we would talk and I'm like, so what do you want to do for dinner? And he'd go, well, why don't we have barbecue? So then I was like, okay, but I was already thinking that. So we started like kind of keeping track of, okay, so I was thinking about doing barbecue at 2:00, and he was like, oh, well, I was thinking about doing barbecue at 10:00. Like who was the one who came up with the idea and who was the one that received it? And so that was that dynamic. And I'm going to tell another true story.
Okay.
So by the time he and I had gotten divorced, I mean, we were separated for like a year, 2 years, something like that. So I was in another relationship. He apparently was in another relationship. And so the divorce papers got finalized, and I went out to dinner, and for some reason I went to Outback for dinner. Now, I'm not really an Outback fan, but for some reason I went to Outback for dinner. And I'm sitting there with my boyfriend, and these people, we were in the bar. And so these people at the table next to us, because we were kind of in a corner, got up, and I turned my head, and who's sitting at the next table over but him and his girlfriend, and he's facing me and just glaring at me. And I was like, okay, so I wonder who got the Outback message first, and who thought about it, and who picked it up, because this is beyond uncomfortable.
Right.
So that's what it's kind of like, where things like that can happen. We would have ghosts that would show up in our house periodically. And so it was just not abnormal, for me to get on the phone and go, there's some man in the kitchen. Do you know who it is?
Right.
But from their end, I kind of don't know, because that's always been my job.
Gotcha. You had mentioned just a second ago that you had ghosts in your house.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that and you may have seen it on the news, but there are some really strange goings on out there in regards to love. What do you make of those people who fall in love with and marry ghosts?
I guess I hadn't really, I guess I've heard of it, but I'm always like, huh?
Yeah.
Okay, whatever.
Yeah,
How's the sex? Sorry.
Yeah, you just put a picture in my head that I really don't want there.
Sorry.
But
I mean, I don't really understand the point of that.
Well, what I get a kick out of are some of those same people actually get divorced from the ghosts, and I'm trying to figure out, what did the ghost do to deserve divorce?
I don't even know how you would get married to a ghost unless you had some, spiritual minister, and I don't mean this offensively, but got their minister thing online for $25 that married you to the ghost.
Now, actually, if I remember correctly, there was a woman back in England who married a ghost, and it was actually a minister from the Church of England who married him. And I'm still trying to understand that one. And if I remember right, she's also one of the ones that got divorced.
Yeah, well, and what's interesting, okay, so I'm going to kind of take it back around to the book. So, one of the topics that I speak on a lot before I got into this one was talking about attached entities, but if you really take an attached entity down to its base, they're the narcissists of the spirit world. So maybe, she married a ghost, but maybe her ghost was a narcissist. And so she was really married to was an attached entity. Huh.
Oh, I hadn't even thought about that.
And attached entities are annoying, and they don't go away. And in a very sick and distorted way, I could almost see how you could have a relationship with some kind of an attached entity in a weird way. I don't know that I'd want one, because they're not very nice, because they're narcissists.
Now, just out of curiosity, that got me to thinking about something. If a person has been in a relationship with a narcissist or even a series of narcissists, can the person actually start to want a narcissistic person in their life? Is that,
for some people, that's what feels comfortable. So you put them in a relationship with someone that is not, running them through these cycles of emotional highs and emotional lows. They could see, a regular person, a not narcissistic person as being boring or being vanilla, and they kind of get addicted to the emotional roller coaster, and some people confuse that for love. And so I could see where, maybe they're not wanting to get into that kind of relationship, but they get benefit out of it. And they're willing to accept the downtime, because with some people, the uptime is really up.
Right.
But the downtime is really down.
So, the reason I was asking that, because you had mentioned that about a narcissistic entity. Could it also be that this woman had been in a bunch of bad relationships and actually wanted one of those relationships and maybe created a fantasy? Because somebody in the chat room had mentioned that the ghost that she was married to was a pirate, and pirates are generally portrayed as being slightly narcissistic themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering if maybe, in her desire to have a narcissistic relationship and she couldn't find one, she created one.
So my observation, and this is kind of a new one, but I'm sticking with it. My observation of people that have entity issues are people that also, I'm going to say have issues with dissociation. So for people that are not familiar with that concept but everybody dissociates at one point in time or another. You're driving your car, and then the next thing you know, you're where you need to be, but you don't really remember how you got there because you were spacing out. So when you're spacing out, basically you're dissociated. And some people, it's kind of a spectrum, dissociate more than other people. And individuals who come from traumatic households, especially if they employ, so there's the fight or flight response, then there are two other responses. There's freeze, where it's kind of like deer in a headlights, where you just can't move, you freeze. And then there's another one that's called fawn, that they believe is the precursor of people becoming people pleasers, where you basically just give up and comply. You fawn. But individuals that freeze, when they go into that deer in a headlight situation, their body actually releases, it activates the parasympathetic system in the body, which calms the body down. But as part of that, it also allows the mind to dissociate, so that you're not there. You're not there while the lion is coming and ripping your throat out and you're going to die. And so even though that's, the benefit for animals, so if you're in a bad situation happening, that's going to happen to you too. And so that's a skill that you can hone as you grow. And I have found that individuals that tend to be more dissociative will have attached entities. People that have addiction issues, because in their addiction they're dissociated, will have entity issues. So I think there's more to that story, perhaps, or else she was just really weird and wanted to marry a freaking ghost. But, my experience with ghosts is, they're either attached to a location, or they're attached to you, or they just kind of come and go, and they're pretty random and not like hanging around really all the time.
Right. Well, now here's something to think about. So if a person marries a ghost and then they get divorced, first of all, how do you divide up the property and belongings? And if in the divorce proceedings the ghost gets the house, is that what causes haunted houses?
And what about all those like quasi people ghost babies?
Yeah.
What happens to them?
Yeah, exactly.
Do they stay on this side of the veil, or do they go on to the other?
That's a good question. I really would like to know the answer to that. Sorry,
you need to find that ghost marrying lady and like have her come on and ask her all these questions. I mean,
yeah. That might actually be an interesting show.
I think it would be a fascinating show.
Well, I'll tell you what, we'll have you on with her, so we can all have a little bit of fun with it. Okay, so one more kind of strange question, sort of, before we get back to the main topic. So this is kind of goes along with the woman who married a ghost, and this happened fairly recently, and it's another one that is just boggles my mind psychologically. There is a guy who actually married his sex doll, okay? And he then divorced her because one of them was cheating. And I can't remember who was cheating on who, but I'm really hoping it was him cheating on his sex doll wife. Had you heard about that one?
No, but I have heard of people having relationships. I mean, do you remember that series Boston Legal with William Shatner? And the accountant guy, had his girlfriend, and she was a blow-up doll.
That was actually filmed right here by where I used to work.
And that's people that fall in love with inanimate objects. I mean, that is an identified psychological condition. I mean, there was a woman who like fell in love with a roller coaster.
Really?
And it's like, okay.
Please tell me she didn't marry the roller coaster.
You just have to kind of like read through that, it's like reading, the Inquirer. It's like, okay, well, it's something to do while you're waiting for your dental appointment to keep you occupied. But it's like, okay, not sure what to think about that.
Yeah,
there was a woman who married the Eiffel Tower, and
really?
she got arrested trying to consummate the wedding, the marriage.
Okay, Angie, you just put another picture in my head that I don't even want there.
I'm glad we're not on video.
The video. How do you think I feel?
Oh my God.
Anyway, sorry. I'm going to exit, but I just had to throw that out there.
No. Before you exit, though, I'm going to put a picture in your head. Did she happen to go to the Eiffel Tower gift shop and buy any mini Eiffel Towers?
Not in the course of the video that I saw, no.
Okay. So just...
Well, see, now I'm trying to figure out what she was doing to try to consummate it. I'm not sure that I want to know, but it's like, did she go all the way up to the very top? I mean, come on.
No. Actually, she was standing on the ground at one of like the sort of angle braces with the rivets. That's all I'm gonna say.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I mean it was part of a series, and I can't remember if it was an internet series or if it was on cable. I was watching some comedians react to it on YouTube. That's how I saw it the first place. So it's not like I I watch this stuff.
Yeah, we know. We want to see your browser history.
No, you don't.
Ooh.
VPN.
Oh, now we really do.
That's just wrong on so many levels. By the way, in the chat room, somebody just put up that the guy who married his sex doll got divorced because he cheated with a machine or something on her. So, I'm assuming he.
And I guess, he was so guilty about it, because don't get the impression that the sex doll was going to complain about it.
Oh, you never know. She could have been jealous.
I was really, really hoping that she was the one that had the affair with like Alexa or something.
Oh, and Siri was watching.
Yeah.
Hey, Google.
We live in a strange world.
Yeah. And you know what? We just had, I'm sorry, we kind of, that's kind of a way to just kind of jump the rails. But, it's Valentine's Day. So I kind of wanted to throw in some interesting Valentine's Day fodder for the people to think about. But anyway, we should probably get back to the topic at hand. So abusers like to say that they love a person. And then even though they abuse them, constantly hurt them, both physically and mentally, most would say that that's not love. How does the abuser justify their behavior and reconcile it with the emotion of love?
They don't, or their view of love is not the same. Their view of love is very conditional. Actually, on my website, that got released today, because it's my Valentine's special article on soulhealer.com. The article is, what does a narcissist mean when they say I love you? Mm-hmm. And so, someone that's an abuser, it's like they justify their behavior. Either they blame you for it. Well, I wouldn't have hit you if you didn't, look away from me. That, and now then I was upset, and so now I reacted and I beat the crap out of you, and so they deflect the blame because they're perfect and they don't do anything wrong because they're narcissists, and then they'll turn around and ask for forgiveness, so they just put this person that they're with through this emotional trauma, and which releases all that cortisol, which I think is where we left off before the break. Mm-hmm. And then, and then they come back and it's like, oh, I love you. I didn't mean to do that. You doing whatever, just really bothered me. And, I won't do it again. I'll go to counseling. I'll go to AA, and they make all these promises, which the people pleaser, wounded empath, holds them at their word, because they wouldn't lie to the other person because they can't deal with that energy.
But if the person has been lying to them repeatedly, why would the abused continue to believe that the person is not lying?
Hope.
Just pure hope.
Pure hope. That's it's going to change. They finally got to the place where they recognize their shortfallings and things are going to change. And they do change, sometimes for a week, sometimes for a month, and then the pattern starts again. So there always is this, reconciliation in narcissist lingo that's called hoovering. So if they think they're going to lose you, they go back to their beginning strategy and they give you all of this attention and they call on you and you're the greatest thing and they go back to that place where they're just really building you up and giving you that person that you fell in love with originally. You know, that person that's got your back, that person that's just really into you.
Right.
But they only can do that for so long, or will only do that for so long, and then they just go back to their old patterns. You know, but one of the things about the chemical stuff is individuals who are abused, the abused, not the abuser, when they have these sudden shifts going from cortisol to dopamine, which is a neurotransmitter, it dysregulates their hormone system. And so it takes you from like these really lows to these incredible highs. So there's this emotional roller coaster that you go on. And, you know, one of the reasons that women will go back is now they said, you're out of here. You know, you need to go or I'm leaving. And now they're jonesing. They want that little high again. It's like, well, you know, if I just send them a little smiley face, that'll be okay. You know, and they're jonesing. And there was someone that made a comment that if someone is really trauma bonded, you know, again, a form of Stockholm syndrome, if there's real trauma bonding to a narcissist, it can be harder than quitting heroin to get your body re-regulated to not craving, I mean, literally craving that little high.
What do you mean by that little high?
That little dopamine release, you know, because when they're nice to you, you know, so you go through this like awful trauma crap, they just beat you, and then they come back and they're super nice to you. You know, and so when they're super nice to you, that's when you get that dopamine release, and it feels good, you know, and so you have the warm and fuzzies. And so if you get rid of them, it's like there's part of you that's jonesing for that connection to get that little dopamine release.
So, in other words, you almost become addicted to the
cycle. No, it's not that you almost become, you become
addicted to the whole cycle.
Correct.
Wow.
And it can take months to get your body re-regulated and disciplined and saying, no, I'm not going to message. You know, one of the things they talk about if you are ending a relationship with a narcissist is to do something that's called go no contact. You delete them on Facebook. You block their phone number, you know, any social media you have with them, you block it depending on what's going on. I mean, there are certain situations where you need to keep email open, like if there are kids involved, you know, certain lines of communication.
So in other words, you need to cut off as much communication, if not all communication as possible.
Correct.
I'm sorry, but we do have to take another station identification break, but we'll get back to this topic on the other side of the break. So hang in there with us.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama.
Paratalk Radio is your one-stop for all things paranormal, the unknown, and the supernatural. Join us every Monday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central for discussions and guests on topics such as ghosts, hauntings, Bigfoot, UFOs, and more. This broadcast is rated M for mature and intended for listeners over 16 on paratalkradio.com.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but... nope. That'll do. Hello. I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experience here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Thank you for listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
The time is 23 minutes after the hour.
Welcome back to the Full Spectrum Project on WBHM-DB out of Birmingham, Alabama. If you haven't joined the chat room, there's still a little bit of time. If you would like, go to WBHM-DB.com, click on our show banner, and that will take you to the chat room. And if you have any questions for our guests or our hosts, and you would like to call in, call area code 205-533-7982. So, Dr. Rita, when we left, we were talking about the abuse, the cycle of abuse. Mm-hmm. So there are a lot of relationships that have, like we were talking about, a repeated cycle of abuse, then remorse with periods of peace that eventually turn right back to abuse. And then it's kind of a rinse and repeat type of situation. Mm-hmm. Is it possible to stop the cycle and find happiness with this type of person?
Probably not that person. I mean, it is possible to find happiness, but probably not that person, because that's probably who that person is. I mean, I think everyone is, and a lot of, I'm going to backtrack on here myself here. It really depends on what's going on with the person who's the abuser. Do they have a drinking problem? And are they going to be willing to address the drinking problem? So there are some things that can be navigated as far as the relationship is concerned to heal the relationship. But if the person is just a jerk and is a narcissist and really doesn't care what you want or what you think, then you probably can't change them because they have that programming. And because they're perfect, there's nothing to fix.
Well, is there any type, like, let's say in a lucid moment, the narcissist does seek, say, psychological help. Is it possible for them to work on the narcissism to, like, get it under control or to at least curb it?
Then they just lie. They lie to the counselor.
Gotcha.
They just lie. And so, it is just easier to just cut your losses and run, to be honest with you. And there are women that's like, I've been in this relationship for 30 years, and it's like, bless your heart for putting up with it for 30 years. But the important thing is that if you're on the receiving end of the relationship, healing is possible for you. You know,
Right.
I joke around with this book because it doesn't say anything kind about a narcissist. And I really doubt a narcissist would pick the book up to read to do any kind of self-healing. So I didn't even address it. I don't think it's possible, but I don't didn't even address it. And my feeling is that if a narcissist picked that book up, instead of having it create self realization within themselves, going, oh, well, you know, I do that, they would just think about people that they know that have those traits, or think about you, about how you at times may have those characteristics, but it would never be about them, ever. You know, so if you're on the receiving end, you know, and that's a big part of what this book talks about, there are things that you can change within yourself so that you don't have to keep repeating the pattern, you know, so that you can go and it's not that narcissists won't come around you, but you will be more ready and willing to address them earlier. Um, or if you're not happy in the relationship, you'll be more willing to express what you want, what you need, and if they're not willing, say goodbye. You know, because part of it is understanding where you've been, you know, recognizing what's going on within you, because narcissists tend to be magnets to people that have inner wounding. One of the things, narcissists are really wounded also. And so sometimes there's a bond that forms between the two parties because they both have the same kind of wounding. You know, except it's
Right.
expressed in very diametrically opposed ways, but in a way where they fit together because they are like the yin and yang of what's going on.
Right. You know, you you usually talk about it from the female aspect, and believe me, I understand that because it's there's a lot more cases of male on female abuse rather than the other way around. Um, but there was a case a few years back that was had a deep connection to the paranormal community, and it ended up in a murder suicide. Now, I'm not going to mention any names, but I have a little bit of personal experience with the people involved. And the consensus was that it was the husband who had been doing the abusing of the wife, and the husband ended up killing the wife because he was an abuser, when it was actually the other way around. It was actually the wife who was doing the abusing, which eventually caused the husband to snap. And I'm just wondering, first of all, are there telltale signs that people can look for? Because I'm sure that there are people that are you know, outside of these relationships looking in, you know, inside at them. Is there something that those people can try and pick up on to make sure that it doesn't go to that violent extreme?
Well, you know, and I would say that, you know, well, two things. You know, I do it from a female perspective because, you know, that's my perspective and it's just easier. How's
Right.
that?
And believe me, I do understand.
You know, well, and I just want to make clear to your listeners, you know, it's not just a guy thing. There are women that are totally narcissistic, you know, and there are women that are abusive, although you are correct in the, or physically abusive. There are some women that are physically abusive, but it tends to be men that are more on that physical abuse side.
Right.
Uh, you know, I think the biggest thing, you know, if this has been a pattern in your life, by working on yourself, by making yourself be more whole, you know, if you think of something that's whole, it's kind of like a circle where if, you know, we were talking about the narcissist and the wounded empath, it's like that yin yang. Well, if you take their part away and you become the whole circle, then you're not interdependent on them to having your needs met, or, you know, making you feel whole, or making you feel good, or making you feel happy. And so if you do end up in a relationship with someone that turns out to be a narcissist, because some of them are very tricky and they're hard to spot, you don't stay. You have enough self-worth to say, gotta go. Even if I gotta go get a job at Walmart, gotta go.
Right.
And that really has more to do with addressing self-worth issues, attachment issues, abandonment issues around rejection, your own feelings of, well, if I get rid of him, then I'm going to be alone. That's a huge one for people. Well, I don't want to be alone. I would rather be with someone that's crappy than be by myself.
Right. Now, just out of curiosity, if you meet somebody that you want to try and form a relationship with, and let's face it, at the start, you don't really know a person. Are there any sort of like telltale signs that you can look for to try and ascertain whether the person might be a narcissist that could possibly lead into an abusive relationship later on?
If they are trying to move things too fast. So we talked about the love bombing, where they're just kind of all about you. I mean, all about you, where you're on the phone with them for 5, 6, 7 hours a day. They often will try to move a relationship forward very quickly. Whether that's, getting married or moving in together or something, they wanted to move forward to get you into that place where they feel safe and they're managing you. One of the other things, I joke around about this, but, people that are narcissists are huge procrastinators. And so, if you ask them to do something and they make excuses, I mean, that's another thing is, they make excuses if you catch them in a lie. And that's, Brian, that's the biggest thing is that many people will get into these relationships and they'll see the red flags early on, but they make excuses for them. Oh, well, he just had a rough day. Oh, well, he's tired. And instead of sitting there going, well, that hurt me, and I just keep coming back to you, like that's not good behavior and I shouldn't have to accept bad behavior.
So what I'm getting is that if a person is already has a propensity for wanting or had the programming to be with a narcissistic person, they'll make excuses for the narcissist so they can keep going forward with the relationship. But the other things you were mentioning for somebody who was not programmed into being in a harmful relationship, those are things that they can look for to kind of make a determination of, okay, this is going too fast. Something's weird with this.
Well, and I think that someone that hasn't experienced a lot of trauma, if something happens, they won't accept it. And they'll just be like, see ya, you got to go. But, healing is possible for people that have experienced trauma, and it's about learning to love yourself, learning to honor yourself, working on boundaries, recognizing where, if you have boundaries at all, so that that to me, that is the biggest piece of not getting into you might get into the relationship, but you're not going to stay for 30 years.
Right.
It is sitting there and working on yourself so that you have the gumption and the fortitude to make that choice and say, you know what, I talked to you about your drinking twice and now you've done it a third time. You're out.
Yeah. So in other words, they need to have the wherewithal to get out of the relationship. We only have about 30 seconds left to go on the show. But what's next for you, Dr. Rita?
Well, I have a History, Haunts, and Legends conference in April.
And I will see you there.
And you will see me there. I don't know. I have a bunch of weird stuff that's kind of popping up that I'm not really sure. I think I will be at the Celtic Fest in Tyler and Geek Con in Kilgore in May. But I need to like respond to emails. But I know we only have a second, but anybody that wants to get the book, it's at soulhealer.com, or that's my webpage if you want to learn more about me or read this new article. What does a narcissist mean when he says I love you? And the dysfunctional dance of the empath and narcissist is available on Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, all that. If you'd like an autographed copy, you can get that through my website. And please sign up for my newsletter.
All right, that sounds good. And yeah, you can find all your books on Amazon. But listen, Dr. Rita, I just want to thank you so much for being on the show. I found it fascinating. It's really an interesting subject, and one that I think a lot more people should pay attention to, because it can be very devastating, not only to the people involved, but to the family around them. So, it's something that everybody needs to be aware of. Anyway, again, thank you so much. And next week, we will be joined by Kathleen Maka, and we will be discussing her book, Haunted Galveston, Texas, along with talking about as much of the haunts of Galveston as possible. So until next week, I'm your host, Brian Clune, and I want to say thank you for being here, and everybody be safe and happy, and we will see you next week. Thank you so much.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama.